Nothing is as crazy these days as the calls to defund the cops. Now, you may be thinking, Buck, come on. They can't really mean defund the cops. They can't really mean that. That's insane. I mean, anybody knows. Defund the cops? And the movie The Purge was not supposed to be a prediction. It was not supposed to be a documentary of the future. And any of you who have seen it, it's pretty good for what it is. It's low budge, but it does pretty well. And they've made a whole bunch of spin-offs of it. But it's about a society where they allow all crime to be condensed into one 24-hour period. Anything goes, including murder, and everyone has to just stay locked in their homes and try to stay alive through the night. And this is how they control crime. So it's all that violence is focused. Now, it's a obviously dystopian concept, but makes for pretty compelling viewing. And what we see here are people telling you that you don't need cops. Here's what I was getting to this before, but then I got into my comparison of Justin Trudeau and Mayor Jacob Frey, because Trudeau is like a Mountie from the 1950s on the horseback and Quebecois speaking. He doesn't sound like that at all. I need to stop. I don't know. I just want to do my French Pierre accent for some reason today. But Mayor Jacob Frey was, he's at the heart of all this stuff because he's trying so hard to try and be on the good side of the protesters. He's one of the guys who wants, he's an ally. That's the term he used. He's an ally. Well, here's what happened when he was at a protest and he said, look, guys, come on, defund the police. We all know that's crazy, right? Nope. They do not think so. Here's what they did when he said that he didn't think that was a good idea. Play clip 3. Shame. That's actually a reference to the Game of Thrones scene that I was mentioning before, which the left loves using that one. Go home, Jacob Frey. This guy is literally on bended knee, crying his eyes out as if George Floyd was his best friend in the whole world. And that's not, you can see there's video of it. Look, it's nice for public officials sometimes to show solidarity at a funeral, but come on, right? He's never met the guy, doesn't know the guy, he's going to cry his eyes out? Why? Well, we all know the question why, we don't have to get in it. We all understand why, because he's pandering and he's a total fraud. But that's what you see all across the media, the Democrat Party. And remember, these are Democrats. I'll say the left. When I say the left, Democrats. That's who's behind this. That's who's doing this. They really hate when you bring that up, too. That all the protests, they're all Democrats. All the people looting and rioting, if they vote, Democrats. All the people engaged in violence against cops, Democrats. People that want to defund police, Democrats. You won't hear this other places. It'll just be referred to in this obscure, the protest, or the movement, or Black Lives Matter. They're all Democrats. Okay? Let's understand that. And there was a mass movement of conservatives a decade ago called the Tea Party, and there was no destruction, no looting, no violence, no nothing, no rioting, none of this, no insane demands. So these political parties, when it comes to their ethics and morality, are not the same, okay? The left is the mob. And this is actually why I think if you haven't read it, she does not, you guys all know that I'm a fan of her work, and she's become a friend over the years. Ann Coulter's book, Demonic, on how the left is the mob, if you've never read it before, and look, I don't get kickbacks for trying to get you to read it right now. Read it right now. And if you've never read Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe, excellent novel that will take you through some of the dynamics you see playing out right now as well. It's his best novel of all time. But the left is the mob. And it is the party of the mob. It is the party of, rabble-rousing on the streets. And that's why it doesn't matter when you present them with facts and you have other stories and other things that you want to be a part of the discussion. No. They're angry. People are angry. I've actually had in debates about these issues in the past, someone will just say that to me as if that's profound. People are angry about a lot of things. It doesn't mean anything. But Jacob Frey gets told, if you won't defund the police, you're the problem. And then, and you guys know I have fun with the CNN anchors. I mean, CNN is the worst place in the media right now, with the possible exception of the New York Times, which I've got an update on that story for you. Guess what? Another head rolling over at the New York Times, so that the woke mob feels like they're being heard. Someone else who, look, it's hard for me to get too sad for some of these libs that lose their jobs at these left-wing institutions, because they're always trying to get other people fired. So it seems like justice at some level. But, I'm a human being, and I care about my fellow human beings, and I want what's best for them. And here's another guy who won't be able to pay his bills, going to have to look his kid. Now, on the left, he'll get another job. He'll be fine. But, for some people, this can be a real disruption. See, I actually think about other human beings and have sympathy for them. Unlike the left that thinks that the 40 million people who have lost their jobs just want a haircut, man. They don't care. They're not upset about the COVID restrictions for any reason other than some basic inconvenience. Really, there are people who are running up credit card debt, can't pay their bills, lost their jobs for no fault of their own. And these psychotic libs want to pretend that somehow they have no point to make. We'll get back to the lockdown thing in a little bit. But here's CNN really, if there's a thing that triggers me these days, and not in a way where I feel unsafe, but a way where I just fly into a blind rage. I mean, CNN is full of the worst people in the media now. The worst. The absolute worst. And they're all egomaniacs. They don't care what's happening to you. They don't care what's happening around the country. They all live in a very small group of places for the ultra rich. They have chauffeurs taking them, literally chauffeurs. This is true. To and from their workplaces. They all fled for their second or third or fourth homes when the COVID thing broke out, and were doing the shows from home, trying to make it seem like they were still in studio, but they're doing it from home. They're the worst. Here's Alison Camerota talking to, this is a member of she's a CNN anchor, and she's speaking to a member of the Minneapolis City Council, which has in fact now voted, it's a veto-proof majority they have voted to defund the Minneapolis police. And no one even knows. And now I say that, and I don't even understand what they really think is going to happen next. I don't know if the police have funds to a certain, I don't think they know. I think they're just trying to placate the mob, trying to be a part of the mob, really. They're not trying to placate it. They don't have a problem with the mob. They want to be in with the mob. But they have voted to defund the police. They have actually done this in Minneapolis now. And I know, we are on a station in Minneapolis. So please, those of you who listen, Team Buck Minneapolis, let us know what the heck is going on in your city right now. Because the rest of the country is looking at this. Everyone who's saying this is completely crazy. They can't really be doing this. No, they are. They are. I was on Tucker's show last week, and I said defunding the police is insane, but it's not impossible. Turns out I was right. That was the first thing I said on Tucker's show on Thursday. Defunding the police is insane, but it's not impossible. And now they're defunding. They're actually doing this. And Camerota, Alison Camerota, is very serious. She cares a lot about social justice. She just wants to get to the truth. And here she is with a member of the Minneapolis City Council asking her about this. And because again, you are listening to this show and you're approaching this as a normal person who understands how the world functions, and you're saying no police force. They can't be serious because, for example, what are people in Minneapolis supposed to do when they hear somebody trying to beat down their door or crash through the glass of a first floor window at 2:00 in the morning? Who are you going to call? Oh, no, the social justice people want you to know that, well, yeah, but calling the cops makes it a more dangerous situation. So we've now gone to the place where the example that we would use to explain how insane the libs, the left, the Democrats are, hey, who are you going to call at 2:00 in the morning? Someone's breaking into your house. They look at you and they go, wow, but cops are really dangerous. So it's better you can't call the cops. What? I mean, it's here she is. Play clip 6. I'll let the city council member speak for herself. Play 6.
There's lessons from all over the country, all over the world that we're looking to take immediate steps while we work toward building the systems that we would need to imagine that future.
Do you understand that the word dismantle or police free also makes some people nervous? For instance, what if in the middle of the night my home is broken into? Who do I call?
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
Calling the police may mean more harm done. Calling the police could make the situation worse when you hear that crash through your window at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's the answer. That's the justification given for what's going to happen when there's no cops. The cops make it worse. This is why last week I said to you, there's no way to reason with those who don't care about reason. Like once you've abandoned facts and sanity and truth and normalcy and objectivity, how do you even have a conversation? You can't have a conversation with people when they think things like cops are calling cops. Think about it this way. You have millions and millions of arrests, 10 million arrests every year. We count the number of people who are unarmed killed by cops by a few dozen. How many people are murdered every year? 15,000, give or take, in the United States. How many more people would be murdered if there were no cops? Your guess is as good as mine, but it's going to be a lot more than 15,000. I can assure you of that. In these minority communities that we're being told the cops are such an evil force, when a drug dealer now kills somebody, or let's say, shoots, this happens in Chicago all the time. Drug dealers get into a gun battle. They have, they're just firing rounds all over a civilian area. And, a 10-year-old girl gets hit by a bullet. There's no cops. What, you're going to send the social workers after them? This is going to be law and order social workers unit. That's what they think is going to happen. They're going to have a nice conversation with them. I got news for those social workers. They're going to get shot at too. But this is what they're talking about. This is the level of insanity, and this is the level of absurdity that the Democrat Party is embracing. Because remember, it doesn't, whatever destruction happens, it doesn't matter. It's all about mobilization and making the country destable and feel like things are going terribly. So whatever they can do to achieve that, it doesn't matter, right? The Democratic Party now views itself largely as an anti-Trump insurgency. And one thing I can tell you about insurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan, and all of you listening who served over there in the military know exactly what I'm talking about. All they have to do is blow stuff up, kill people, and cause a mess. And then people eventually say, look, if you can't protect me, maybe the insurgents can. So here what they're doing, they're not blowing things up, necessarily. They're not actually taking those same tactics, because that would be self-defeating at this phase. But they are engaged in destabilization, massive looting, rioting, and anarchy on the streets, so that people just say, well, I guess the Trump era has brought this about. I'll go with anything that's not this. The alternative has to be better than this. So they're incentivized to keep this going as long as they can. And I think what you'll see is actually repeated waves of this, because now it becomes their method of switching whatever the news cycle is, switching it away from a topic they don't like to a topic they do like, right? If there's good jobs numbers, riot in the streets, Black Lives Matter, silence is violence, all the things you're hearing being chanted. And you say, well, hold on, we actually had the economy starting to get a little better. Do you not care about Black lives? Wait, I thought, but this is a segment on the economy. Well, are you not going to bend the knee? Really? You don't think that bad things are happening in minority communities across the country every day, that law enforcement is systemically racist? Wait, but the jobs affects everybody. The economy affects everybody. No, it doesn't. How dare you? That's where this all goes. It becomes their mechanism for controlling the conversation and also switching perception. And that is what they will continue to do. So don't think, even if this fades away, which it might, but it might not. It'll come back. It'll come back just in time, as will the demands for lockdowns. Because even the possibility of lockdowns in some states will tank the economy enough right before the election to make people think that something else has to be better than this. Anything is better than Trump is what the Democrats want as their rallying cry. So guess what? All you have to do for that is make life unlivable for as many people as possible. And then the alternative becomes the only answer. Even if the alternative is a buffoon who forgets what country he's in, what year it is, or what office he's running for. They don't care.
I will never co-sign on funding a police department that continues to brutalize us. And I will never stop saying, not only do we need to disinvest in police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department. The Minneapolis Police Department is rotten to the root. And so when we dismantle it, we get rid of that cancer and we allow for something beautiful to rise. And that reimagining allows us to figure out what public safety looks like for us.
Dismantle the police department, sitting U.S. member of Congress Ilhan Omar says. And she says this as someone who represents a district in Minneapolis that was the most destroyed of all in Minnesota as a result of the riots and protests that happened here. So her answer is to get rid of all cops. The cops couldn't even handle the riots they already had. Now she's saying get rid of police. So you'd have to wonder what is going to replace the police. How are you going to have anybody think that they could be safe there? Keep in mind that last year, I thought this was interesting, according to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, St. Paul's homicide rate, says here, doubled the year before. So there has been a surge in killings. And you'd want to know, hold on a second, why is that happening? The median, here's the Star-Tribune, 2019 homicides in St. Paul for Minneapolis, St. Paul. The overwhelming majority died of gunshots. That's not surprising. About half the killings have resulted in murder or manslaughter charges. That is not a high clearance rate. I'm trying to see what the number of... St. Paul surpassed 25 homicides for the year. So you want to know what happens. What happens when they get rid of the cops? What happens to the people that have been killed? Do their families get any justice? They're going to have social workers show up? So, they went from 15 to 30 is what the Star-Tribune here says. So they're already seeing a spike that, look, it's a small number overall, but that's just one city. What happens when you get rid of all the cops? Who solves those murders?
We send out people with guns and they are there to use deadly force no matter what the problem may be. If the problem is sexual assault, we send somebody with a gun. If the problem is domestic violence, we send somebody with a gun. If the problem is somebody in a mental health crisis, we send somebody with a gun. And I think that what we need to do as a society, as a city, is to say, is there a better way to have people be safe and secure, to investigate crime and to hold people accountable? Is there a better way to conceive of this? Because let me tell you, so many of when President Obama had 21st century policing, it was groundbreaking. They had a lot of great reforms. Why did he call it 21st century? Because so much of our policing is rooted in the 20th century or even the 19th century. We haven't really updated what we do in terms of training, in terms of preparation, in terms of various problems. And so much of safety and security involves mental health professionals, involves, recreation for youth. It involves a lot of things. And just having a paramilitary group where we send somebody with a gun to solve every problem might not be the only way or the best way.
We don't send someone with a gun to solve every problem. Everything Keith Ellison says here is effectively a lie, untrue, or a misdirection what he says, when there's domestic violence, we send somebody with a gun. Yeah, because that's actually the most dangerous thing that most cops do. That and traffic stops per capita. Because you know what happens when you're on a traffic stop? You run someone's plates. You know what you might find out when you're running their plates? That they're wanted in 3 states for murder. Guess what happens if you show up and you think you're just writing a ticket, but you don't have a gun? You're a sitting duck. Guess what happens when you show up to a domestic violence dispute and you have no means of defending yourself, and, the crazy, violent, drugged up husband decides that you're, getting in the way of his fun by abusing his family and doing horrible things, and comes at you with a baseball bat. You're going to say, "Oh, I'm just part of the special social workers unit, sir. Don't hit me with that bat." How much dumber is the left going to get? I don't know. They've really gone down to the stupidity basement. I don't know if there's a level below this. We send men with guns. There's a reason for that. Has Keith Ellison never spoken to somebody in law enforcement? Does he have no idea what he's talking about? We have social workers. We have people that work for, in New York, they call it the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. There are people that come to deal with problems all the time, don't have guns. We got park rangers in New York that don't have guns. Some park rangers do in some places because they need to. Oh, you know why? Because you know what will happen if you catch somebody poaching in a national park and they got 2 guys with high-powered rifles and you're unarmed? Maybe they don't want to face a $100,000 fine and a year or 2 in federal prison. So guess what? There are reasons that people carry in law enforcement, that they carry the weapons that they do. And people say, "Oh, Buck, well, what about in Great Britain?" Okay, yeah, first of all, if you want to look at the number of homicides, now the left is pretending like we don't have a violence problem in this country, which is fascinating. Now we have to act like we don't have gangbangers shooting it out in inner cities all over the country on a regular basis. There were, I think it was 18 people killed in Chicago. Don't quote me on the number because I just saw it a second ago as I was in the break. But 18 people killed in Chicago over the weekend, murdered. That's one city. What do you think happens? What do you think happens when the police are gone? You think in Chicago, well, that's almost all violence on the south and I believe part of the west of Chicago, but it's really all on the south side. It's gang violence mostly over drug turf and people getting caught in the crossfire of that. What do you think happens when there are no cops to tell them to stop doing that, or no cops with guns? You think that the guns that are all over the south side of Chicago disappear? It's amazing that in the cities they want to disarm the citizenry and disarm the police. Meaning the only people with guns are going to be the bad guys. Oh, don't call them bad guys. They're just misunderstood. I mean, we're really returning to that conception of criminals aren't criminals. They're our fault. That was prominent in liberal circles in the 70s and led to these hellscapes in major U.S. cities that lasted for decades. We finally came out of that. You know how? Policing. Expecting everyone to obey the law and punishing those who do not. We've had in this country overall a major decline in violence that's been going on for a couple of decades now. And we have it at the levels of policing that we currently have and the way that we're doing policing. And yet they want to try this experiment where we're just going to have effectively glorified social workers in place of cops. They really think, have they never, you want to ask some of these libs who are saying this stuff, have they never dealt with a really bad person? Have they never had someone that was on the street that was a true threat? They don't know what that's like. They've never been around that. They've never seen that. They think that everyone can be reasoned with. When Keith Ellison brings up, when someone's, they call it in the NYPD an EDP, an emotionally disturbed person. That sometimes means a crazy naked person covered in their own feces, who's running around biting people, and they send the cops do you want to go in there without a firearm or a baton or anything else? You just want to go in there and reason with that person? I just want to know. Who's going to sign up for the law enforcement job of, I'm going to go into places, you're going to serve warrants without firearms? You're going to do highway patrol without firearms? Where are they going to decide that this is... You're going to have everyone just wait for the SWAT team. Eventually people with guns are going to have to show up. Do you want to get rid of the guns with them too? I mean, I'm almost frustrated that we even have to have a discussion about this because it's so stupid. And yet this is where they are. This is what they've brought the conversation to. And people at CNN and the New York Times who live in the richest parts of Washington, D.C. and New York City, who think that their doormen will keep them safe and the cops will come when they call them, even though they don't want cops for other people. And if things really get bad, they'll hire private security. Their companies will hire private security at their armed guards in their, in their lobbies, armed guards in their newsrooms. But you don't get to have a gun and are all alone here in New York City. You know how long it takes? I have a friend who just found this out. To get a long gun permit, if I wanted to get a shotgun for sporting clays, get like a 20 gauge double barrel. You know how long it would take in New York City? 6 to 9 months. That's the legal process here for getting a firearm. They want to get rid of guns in the hands of cops. This is all a total outrage. AOC, one of the dumbest people in the United States Congress, not the dumbest, but one of the dumbest. Now they're hitting the cops for not having enough. Now it's not enough training. Oh, you think cutting their funding is going to make them better trained and better equipped to handle all this stuff? Play 15.
Another thing that we need to see, I think this is something that we saw it in Ferguson especially, but we've seen it across the country. The militarization of our police is enabled by the federal government. And I want everyone to draw a direct line between our police budget and our defense budget here in the United States of America, because we would not be giving local police departments who are undertrained a tank if we didn't give the military too much money to have extra damn tanks lying around to begin with.
Too much money spent on law enforcement and militarization of police and all this other stuff that she's saying. Look, I mean, a militarization of police point, I'm fine with having that discussion. They're talking about no police with guns. So we've gone from they can't have tanks to they can't have a sidearm. And they're supposed to enforce the law in a very dangerous America. It's a big problem, my friends. It's something that we're going to have to deal with increasingly because they've dug in on this position. So they're not going to abandon this one easily. And anybody who tries to challenge this, what they're going to say, you're racist. Anyone who says, no, cops need to have firearms and need to be able to enforce the law, you're racist. That's what it's going to be. So get ready for that. They're not going to try to engage on the merits and look at the data and what's going to keep people safer. What does it mean in minority communities? You know where they ran a depolicing experiment recently, starting right around 2015, 2016? Baltimore. Baltimore cops were like, okay, after the Freddie Gray incident in particular, they said, we're not going to be doing a whole lot more of this, and meaning policing. And murder rates shot up and people felt unsafe. And a city that already couldn't afford to have anybody feel like it was getting worse got a whole lot worse and a whole lot less safe. So it's a big problem. Huge. And I don't know where the sane people are that should, why can't we by the way, we should all be protesting, and I want to get to this too. So at least there's no question that we're never going back to lockdown because it was all meant to control us and it was a fraud, right? That social distancing is a joke because it's only something that's okay until libs think there's some important virtue signaling opportunity out there, and then it goes out the window. God bless the Attorney General Bill Barr. He's the right man for this moment. The administration has benefited so much from this guy, for having somebody who is a steady hand, a brilliant mind, and does not quake, does not have his knees shaking together when the mob comes a-calling, the media mob, the actual mob on the streets. Here is what the Attorney General of the United States had to say in a recent interview about whether or not law enforcement is systemically racist. Play clip 9.
Do you believe there is systemic racism in law enforcement? I think there's racism in the United States still, but I don't think that the law enforcement system is systemically racist. I understand the distrust, however, of the African American community given the history in this country. I think we have to recognize that for most of our history, our institutions were explicitly racist. Since the 1960s, I think we've been in a phase of reforming our institutions and making sure that they're in sync with our laws and aren't fighting a rearguard action to impose inequities.
And you think that's working?
I think the reform is a difficult task, but I think it is working and progress has been made. I think one of the best examples is the military. The military used to be explicitly racist institution, and now I think it's in the vanguard of bringing the races together and providing equal opportunity. I think law enforcement has been going through the same process.
The guy is eloquent. He understands the racial inequities of the past, and even stretching all the way into the 1960s. And as a function of law and government, the racism that was enshrined in law, he's not in any way, minimizing that or dismissing it or anything else. But he's also saying, well, we have to look at where we are now, not where we were 50 or 60 years ago. And to say that law enforcement is systemically racist, someone would have to ask the question, in what ways and how? And ask for real answers about this. Why is law enforcement systemically racist? I keep hearing this repeated all the time, and he says no, he doesn't think law enforcement. How is it systemically racist? We have on criminal justice matters laws that are all across the board supposed to be race neutral. We have a jury of our peers convicting us in criminal cases. Cops. Do we have any evidence that cops are? Remember, it's systemic. Systemic does not mean occasional or aberrant or once in a while. It means this is how it's set up. It's set up. This is what the system produces on purpose. This is what the system is doing. Systemic racism, how? They never answer that. They just repeat the systemic racism point as if that just saying it enough will somehow fix it or somehow make anything better. Here we have Bill Barr talking about the Lafayette Square protest that got so much attention from the media last week. That was the biggest. While cities were burning and neighborhoods were getting their windows shattered and rocks thrown through them and all this stuff, the biggest problem in the country was that a protest was moved using non-lethal measures near Lafayette Park, which is right next to the White House. And who was there, tear gas, or was it just pepper spray, or what? All this stuff, as if that was the single most important thing to happen in the whole country. We kept hearing that it was a peaceful protest. Here's the Attorney General, whom I've come to see as a straight shooter and a guy who we have no reason to not believe based on everything I know. Oh my gosh, the libs are all, he's a liar, he works for Trump, because they're psychos. But here's what he says about whether this was a peaceful protest. Play clip 17.
At that point, it was not to respond.
On Monday, you're saying there were projectiles.
On Monday, yes,
because,
they were.
As I'm saying, 3 of my colleagues were there.
Yeah.
They did not see projectiles being thrown.
I was there.
When
I
that
was there.
happened.
They were thrown. I saw them thrown.
And you believe that what the Park Police did, using tear gas and projectiles, was appropriate?
Here's what the media is missing. This was not an operation to respond to that particular crowd. It was an operation to move the perimeter 1 block.
And the methods they used, you think, were appropriate? Is that
when
what
they
you're
met
saying?
resistance, yes. They announced 3 times. They didn't move. By the way, there was no tear gas used. The tear gas was used Sunday when they had to clear 8th Street to allow the fire department to come in to save St. John's Church. That's when tear gas was used.
There were chemical irritants. The Park
No, there were not
Police
chemical
said.
irritants. Pepper spray is not a chemical irritant. It's not chemical.
Pepper spray, you're saying, is what was used.
Pepper balls.
It's good to get some facts out there, isn't it? Notice how Margaret Brennan, another LibJourno fraud, works for CBS. Oh, I'm just bringing you the facts, but I look very serious when I do it. You're a lib. I can tell you everything she believes, everything she thinks. I can sit down and just check off a list of all of it. It's all the classic. This is what you think if you're going to be a journalist, and have the other journalists clapping for you. Oh, you're so smart. Obvious, right? Classic LibJourno who doesn't even realize she's a lib. She just thinks that, oh, this is what smart people think. Okay. Good luck with that one. The Attorney General, though, getting out some truth is a good thing. And then he spoke on this issue. We'll talk about what the New York Times has done in just a moment here. But here he talked about law enforcement and the possibility of having to call in troops. He says, look, if we got to play 8.
Well, it depends on the circumstances. I was involved in the L.A. riots and the Rodney King matter. We tried to use non-military forces. I sent 2,000 federal law enforcement officers out there in one day, but it was overwhelming, and the National Guard couldn't handle it. And Governor Pete Wilson asked for federal troops.
And he asked for it, though.
Yes.
That's a key distinction.
Or he approved the use of federal troops, but those troops were on standby as well.
Because I think a number of people would be surprised to hear, and it's been reported that you opposed sending in active duty troops on principle. You're saying you would support it.
As a last resort.
Of course. Of course, as a last resort. Like, well, what's the alternative? Oh, yeah, defund the cops, defund the military, no guns for anybody except the bad guys, the rioters, the looters. And the media, while they're just, all they're thinking about is, how they can get into the fanciest club in the Hamptons and out in Bethesda, make sure that the right set of people likes them. They're pretending like they're okay with all of this.